what I want to do tonight in this last session is kind of connect some dots. And we're living in a very interesting time. Since October 7th of 2023, if there's been any immediate result of this event, it's that it has unmasked the anti-Semitism that has been brooding not so far beneath the surface. And I mean, it's everywhere. And it seems to emanate off of the college campuses, and people wonder why that is. Well, one of the reasons, it's not the only reasons, but one of the reasons is, folks, the hippies of the 70s are the professors today. And these kids in these colleges have been sitting there day after day being regaled with the stories from their professors of how they protested the Vietnam War and demonstrated against it. And so now they're out there protesting. This is their chance to emulate their professors. They have no idea what they're protesting. We know this because they tell us. I mean, the news people get out there and say, why are you here? We're protesting. What are you protesting? I have no idea. I would think you'd figure that out before you got out there, right? And, you know, the worst thing about it is they have made Hamas the victim and Israel the bad guy. It was Israel that was mercilessly attacked. And they say none of those things ever happened. Well, number one, they're documented. Number two, Hamas is bragging about it. They're the ones putting it out there. Why should the demonstrators deny that these things happen when Hamas won't? And there are things that have happened on October 7th that if I explained to you a lot of these things, you wouldn't sleep for nights. What I will tell you is that every home, in Israel, the homes, your apartments, you usually buy your apartments, but you have to have a safe room. It's by law. And the safe room looks like any other room in your house, but it has no windows. And the door hermetically seals. And this was demanded because of threat of chemical warfare. So if the sirens go off, you take your family into that safe room, seal yourself in until the sirens sound again, and then you can come out. Hamas, knowing that the Jewish families had these safe rooms and would barricade themselves inside the safe rooms, just burn the houses to the ground with them in their safe room along with it. And yet they become the victim. Now, you've got to understand, Israel is not at war with the Palestinians, but with Hamas. And we need to make that differentiation. While all Hamas are Palestinian, not all Palestinian are Hamas. Okay, it's like all rednecks are not KKK. But all KKK are rednecks. Does that help? Okay. We've got to make a way to understand this. Israel, since 1948, has bent over backwards for the Palestinian people. She has opened her arms, welcomed them to remain right from the very beginning, and promised them that they would not be made second-rate citizens. And so Arafat turned up the hate speech, took 400,000 out with him, and those are the refugees everybody moans and groans about, but they left on their own volition. Those that remained, took Israel up on their offer, to this very day have a higher standard of living in Israel under the Israeli government than in any Arab nation in the world. There's a wonderful meme that goes around the internet, and it comes and goes, but it shows a Palestinian woman, probably in her late 20s, early 30s. And she's saying, I have a driver's license, I can drive a car. I have a college degree, I have a profession. I can leave my home any time of day or night and go anywhere I want without being escorted by my husband. I have all of this because I live in Israel. And it's so very true. In 1993, Israel signed the Oslo Accords. It was a land for peace agreement. The idea was we would give some land to the Palestinians. They could have some self-identity, some self-governance. They're in the land still under the authority of Israel. And they would return and give us peace. Well, they got the land. We seldom got the peace. When Israel formed her government, Israel's government is a parliamentary government. And there are 34 parties in her government. We can't handle 2 and an independent. They have 34. 2 of those parties represent the Palestinian people. I mean, who does that? I live in Texas. Texas won her independence from Mexico at the Battle of San Jacinto. And when she formed her government, she included no party to represent Mexico and either Maximilian or Santa Anna. No one does that. When America won our independence from Great Britain and formed our government, we included no party to represent King George in Great Britain. You just don't do that. Israel does. So Israel, over and over and over again, has proven she's not at war with the Palestinian people. But at this point, they are at war with Hamas. So we have to ask ourselves, since the focus always seems to be on the Palestinians, where did the Palestinians come from? And what you need to know, these are really a group of vagabond Arabs that have been thrown out of every Arab country in the world. Remember when they were protesting early on, and the reporters would say, well, you know, Israel for weeks, a couple of months, sent flyers in and saying, don't be home, we're coming, leave or die. And they said, well, yeah, but then they told them to leave, but they closed the border to Egypt. Israel didn't close that border. Egypt closed the border. Egypt had already thrown these people out once. They didn't want them back. And so Jordan closed her borders. Saudi Arabia, closed her borders. Because they've already gotten rid of these people. They don't want them again. My take on the Arab states at this point is they're just using the Palestinian people to get rid of this Jewish state. And if the Palestinian people die in the process, so what? That's 2 birds with 1 stone, because we really don't have any use for the Palestinian people to begin with. And that's the attitude. But what happened was, their ancient history, by the way, and when President Trump floated his idea for the Gaza Strip, to relocate those Palestinian people out of Gaza, build them a city, a modern city, and they could have everything imaginable and not have to live under the threat of war constantly. And he said, then America will take over the Gaza Strip, and then we will build it into a resort area, and it will be, and they laughed at him, but if you go just up the coast a little bit, you come to Tel Aviv, and along the Mediterranean shoreline, that's a resort area. And it's perfect for it. Well, that happened yet. Well, they talked to this one woman from Gaza, a Palestinian woman, and she said, we don't want to leave Gaza. This is our ancient homeland. Ancient homeland. Folks, the problem is, my guide always says, you can't stick a shovel in the earth and not pop up ancient history. And that's true. This is how we found Bet Shan, one of my favorite sites, where Saul and his son's headless bodies were nailed to the wall of the city by the Philistines. It's in the Gilboa Mountains up in the north, and it's a fabulous site. But they found it because they were going to build a grocery store, and they excavated, popped up an ancient piece of pottery. When that happens by law, you have to bring the government in. They decided to dig, and thankfully they did. Somebody told me that when fully excavated, it will rival Ephesus, and I think it already does. I really do. So anyway, all throughout the land you have these ancient relics, but they're all Roman and Israeli. There are no Palestinian relics because they don't exist. The Palestinian ancient history goes no deeper than World War I. World War I, they landed in this little strip of ground that was really no man's land at this point, and we're calling it Israel today. But they were living harmoniously side by side with Jewish people at this point. And then in 1917, the Balfour Declaration decreed that the Jewish people deserved a homeland. So they decided that this little piece of ground, from the river to the sea, you hear the chant, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, from Lebanon to Egypt, that this is where what would be the homeland for the Jewish people. But unfortunately, they didn't name it Israel. They reached in and named it, found an antiquated name and called it Palestine. These vagabond Arabs squatting on the land took their name from the land, called themselves Palestinian. And this is as deep as their history really goes. Now, Palestine is not a biblical word. My Bible maps say Palestine in the time of the patriarchs, Palestine in the time of Jesus and the apostles. There's no such thing. It's Israel. I know that in the Old Testament it does talk about once or twice Palestinia, but that's not talking about Palestine like you and I would be thinking today. That's literally speaking of Philistia and the Philistines. So it's a whole different thing. So that word came along because there was a meager uprising in 135 AD, and it was another Jewish revolt against Roman rule. Hadrian's emperor comes in, puts a rebellion down very easily, rubs their noses in their defeat, changes the name of their beloved homeland from Israel, names it for their worst enemy. Israel's worst enemy, biblically speaking, the Philistines. So they named it Palestine, Palestinia, after the Philistines, after Philistia. And anyhow, this is where the name comes along. But then it went away, and now they've dug it back up again. And so this is where they begin, but it doesn't stop there. Then we come to World War II. World War II, the Arab states were vacillating. One day they were fighting with the Allied forces, the next day the Axis powers, and it's back and forth. It's kind of like whoever's winning at the time. So the Allied forces go to them and say, look, if you'll stay with us through the end of the war, and we're successful, you'll be properly rewarded. So they did. The Allied forces won World War II. Russia bows out, leaves France and Great Britain to divide up the world, and they left the Arab states out. So now they feel cheated, lied to, used, and all that would be true. So they determined they're going to carve out their own Arab world, and this is what they start with. Across the northern cap of Africa, you have Montenegro, the Western Sahara, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Sudan, Somalia. This one took me forever, Djibouti. And then you have Yemen, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and so on. Okay, this is what they start with. This is another view of it with this coloration sometimes makes it easier to see. But it didn't stop there. The 1980s, the Iron Curtain comes down, and then we pick up all the stands. You know, all those former Soviet Union countries that ended in stand, but we have trouble with the first part of the name. So we have, I'm sorry, where are we going? Yeah, so we have Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, we figured out Afghanistan, Pakistan, but now it picks up Iran, Turkey, and deeper into the northern cap of Africa. But it doesn't stop there. It continues on until to this day, and this map's dated a little bit, so I would expect it's expanded some more. Everything you see in red here is the Arab world that they've carved out for themselves. People like to refer to this as the 1040 window. You probably have heard of that. Now we're going up into Russia, Kazakhstan, down here on the eastern end of India, these two island nations, the entire northern cap of Africa, more of the eastern coast of Africa, and into Europe. Can you spot Israel on this map? Could you even find it? Right here. This little yellow splotch, that's Israel. When the Arab leaders, when the Arab people refer to, and you probably heard it in the news a lot, they call my people, the Israeli people, occupiers, right? It's not in defense of the Palestinian people. They are not saying that the Jewish people are occupying land that rightfully belongs to the Palestinians. They don't care anything about the Palestinians. They wouldn't defend them in any way, shape, or form. They will use them, but not come to their defense. What they're saying is they are occupying Arab land, and at all costs they want them out because they are smack dab in the middle of their Arab world. Every time that they open a map of their Arab world that they've carved out for themselves, right there, dead center, is this Jewish state, and it's like sticking a hot poker in their eyes, and they just want it gone. That's what this is all about. This is why they will not countenance Israel sharing the land with the Palestinians. This is why they want them gone altogether and drive them into the sea. By the way, you do know that there has always been a two-state region since 1948. The same UN charter that created the modern state of Israel created a Palestinian state. Do you know where it's supposed to be? Jordan. It was the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, or Transjordan at the time. King Hussein of Jordan woke up one day and 3/4 of his country were Palestinians. He got threatened by that and threw them out. It's all right for him to do that, but it's not okay for Israel to share the land. It's because they're on land they don't belong on, because it's not Palestinian land, it's Arab land, and they want them gone. Now, Israel, I could stand up here all day long and try to help you to understand what Israel faces every day of her existence. It's very difficult, but when you go over there, you don't see the people wrapped up in any of the threat. I mean, obviously they had to stay close to the air raid bunkers, and so that when the missiles were coming, they would be safe. But the rest of the time, and they knew that Iran was firing those missiles at night, so the rest of the day they're going about their lives. And then in the evening, they just stay close to the bunkers. If you saw any news of Israel today with the ceasefire, the people are just going along just as happy as they can be. They don't live in fear. They know this is a reality, but they don't live in fear. It's remarkable. But with all that they face, there's a little 5-minute video here that can explain it better than I ever could. And so when it's done, then I'll come back and I will point out some things. So this is where I cross my fingers, toes, and cross my eyes, hope it plays. We need audio.
State surrounded by Arab countries 650 times its size, some of which are large bases of global terror.
Here?
Only 44 miles separate between the Jordan Valley and the Mediterranean Sea. After the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel was attacked by 4 armies on 3 fronts, United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 stated that Israel was entitled to new defensible borders to replace the previous fragile lines from which it was attacked. What are Israel's defensible borders? What are its essential security needs? The Jordan Rift Valley, Israel's eastern frontier, forms a natural barrier between Israel and the countries of Jordan, Iraq, and Iran. The Jordan Valley rises from an area that is 1,200 feet below sea level to a hilly ridge of up to 3,000 feet, creating a steep 4,200-foot virtual wall opposite any force attacking from the east. The growing threat of global jihad activity near Israel's borders requires it to prevent infiltrations of terrorists and weapons. When Israel left the Philadelphia corridor in Gaza, it became a highway for the infiltration of terrorists and the flow of hundreds of tons of ammunition and weaponry from all over the Arab world, aimed at Israeli civilians. The Jordan Valley is the equivalent of Gaza's Philadelphia corridor in the West Bank. To defend itself, Israel must retain control over the Jordan Valley. This is Israel's mountain ridge, rising up to 3,000 feet. It dominates Israel's major coastal cities, where more than 70% of its population, 80% of its industry, and all of its airfields and seaports are located. Missiles launched from the Judean hills pose an immediate threat to Jerusalem, Israel's capital. Israel's only international airport, Ben Gurion, would be in the range of even primitive rockets, while all planes taking off and landing would be threatened by shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. More advanced weaponry would be able to hit virtually any point in Israel. If Israel were forced back to the 1949 armistice lines, the Green Line, the country's width would be reduced to a narrow 9-mile waistline that would be impossible to defend. That's why any future arrangement must include Israeli control over key areas of the mountain ridge and a demilitarized Palestinian state. Israel's narrow borders means a combat aircraft can cross the entire country in under 4 minutes. In less than 2 minutes, an enemy plane could penetrate the country's airspace via the Jordan Valley and reach Jerusalem. In order to thwart an aerial attack on Jerusalem, a hostile plane must be shot down at least 10 miles east of the capital to prevent it from crashing into major population centers. Therefore, Israel must be able to identify hostile planes before they cross the Jordan River line and intercept them shortly after. To defend itself, Israel must control the airspace over the West Bank. Israel's transportation arteries, and in particular the Trans-Israel Highway, enable travel and connection between Israel's regions. They also assure the mobility of the Israel Defense Forces in case of attack. Protection of these vital arteries is essential in order to ensure that 1. Civilians aren't victims of terrorist gunfire. 2. Regions of the country cannot easily be cut off. 3. The mobility of Israel's defense forces is not hindered in the case of invasion. To defend itself, Israel must control its main arteries of transportation. There is enormous uncertainty about future trends in the Middle East. Iran is determined to become the supreme power as the U.S. withdraws from Iraq. No one can guarantee the future of many of the current regimes in the region. Today, more than ever, it is crucial to ensure defensible borders for Israel.
Okay, let me point out something real quick before I go on. See this little symbol up here? That's not just a logo. Do you know what that is? That's an ancient map of the world. Remember when we come into the Cardo, they have maps like this, and what you have here is Ham, Shem, Japheth. You have Ham, the African continent. You've got Shem, the Asian continent. You have Japheth, the European continent. Smack dab in the middle, Jerusalem. The ancient world always considered Jerusalem to be the center of the world, because by land you could not traverse from one continent to the other without coming through Jerusalem. So therefore, whoever controlled Jerusalem could control world commerce and world trade. And that's why it's the most fought over piece of ground in man's history. But you remember in the beginning, and I don't know if the audio was on yet or not, but at the very beginning it talks about Israel being surrounded by enemies 650 times their size. That's a little hard to wrap our heads around, but somebody one time said that this is like taking a cigar box and putting the cigar box on the 50-yard line of a football stadium. That cigar box is Israel. The rest of that football stadium are the Arab nations. And yet, this little meager nation, right now there's about 7.3 million Jewish people in Israel, and that's all age groups. So they have a much smaller fighting military force to draw from, because those that are just graduated high school till 50, that's where they draw their military from. So out of 7.3 million, you might have 4 million that you can choose from, maybe less. And yet this meager little piece of ground holds all of this at bay. The Six-Day War, 1967, which they had a much smaller military force to be able to assemble, and yet they fought 4 wars on 3 fronts in 6 days and came out totally victorious. This has never happened in all of man's history. If you don't see the hand of God here, you're not looking. There's no other reason for this. And so we see that Israel being surrounded by her enemies. And then you saw the dotted green, well, you saw the Gaza Strip, the Philadelphia corridor. This is where Hamas has dug in and rooted in. And of course, she's been financed mostly by Iran, so we're hoping that this will come to a stop as well. But they wouldn't be there except for George W. Bush. George W. Bush sent his Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, and she wouldn't even say she was going to Israel. She made all the Sunday morning news programs, and she was talking about her upcoming mission to the Middle East. She would never say Israel. Her plane landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. Her motorcade took her to the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. And every day her motorcade took her to the Knesset, the Israeli government, to meet with the Israeli Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon. But she couldn't say she was going to Israel, just the Middle East. And that to me was a red flag. When you have arguably the second most powerful person in all of the free world right under the President of the United States who could not form the word Israel publicly, that's a problem. When she returned, she went on all these programs again and boasted of her accomplishments, how that she pressured Ariel Sharon into giving up the Gaza Strip. And I mean, we divested of that and raised everything to the ground that they'd ever built to show that that's theirs. We're not coming back. Then she said she spent several more days to pressure Sharon into giving up the security control of the Gaza Strip, which made it a free flow of terrorism, which you saw in this little video. None of this happens except for George W. Bush. And after October 7, he was interviewed on the news, and he came off so sage and all of this. He was always pro-Palestinian right from the very beginning. The last thing he did on his way out of office was stand in the Knesset and demand that they give the Golan Heights back to Syria. Well, the Golan Heights are the high ground. And again, this is what Obama wants. And so you saw that dotted green line, the armistice line. An armistice is what you have before you have a treaty. So this border can fluctuate until you have a treaty, and then it's fixed. So that's the 1947 armistice line, and Obama was demanding that Israel return to the pre-1967 borders. Whatever happened to the victor go the spoils? They didn't ask for this war. It landed on them, but they were to give everything back. The problem is Netanyahu happened to be there when he was demanding this that last time. And so Obama goes into the Oval Office, and no president goes anywhere alone, so staffers followed him in, and Netanyahu went in with him. They closed the door, and in his wonderful manner, this is a man that never really doesn't have to raise his voice to get his point across, right? And he just looked at him and said, the problem with what you're insisting upon, it's no longer 1967. You're asking us to leave large portions of our people outside of our borders where we can't protect them. You're asking us to give up the high ground. You saw those red circles, where anybody standing there at any point along the high ground with a shoulder-mounted missile can take out everything that is Israel. It's no longer 1967. This cannot work. And he leaves the Oval Office, and Obama was outraged. He was furious. And the staffers leaked the story, and that's the best thing about staffers. They can never keep their mouths shut. But Obama was pounding on that Resolute desk, screaming at those staffers, don't you ever let this happen to me again. Never again, never again. Do you know what never again is? It's remember the Alamo. It's the Israeli remember the Alamo. Never another Holocaust again. And what Obama was demanding would have brought a modern-day Holocaust. And so we have all of this going on here. Now, the land that God gave, the land that we are quarreling over, is this little piece of ground right here. Again, from the river, the Jordan River, to the sea, the Mediterranean. This is what we're talking about. This is not all that God gave to Abram. This is only a very small portion. Joshua 1 and verse 4 tells us, as they're coming into the land, God has to define the boundaries so that they know the length and breadth. And he tells them, from the wilderness, this red line could encompass all of Saudi Arabia, to Lebanon, from the great river, the Nile, to the Euphrates. Now, my friend that put this together for me just followed the Euphrates all the way up. It should stop here because it's got to come below Lebanon. To the great sea toward the going down of the sun, the Mediterranean shall be your coast. So this is what God gave, not just this little piece of ground. Do you remember when they were at Beersheba and they sent the 12 spies into the land? Beersheba is here. They're well within the borders of the land. And do you remember when they were here and they were ready to cross over Jordan, and 2.5 tribes told Joshua, we want to stay on the east side of the river. He said, you can do that. First you have to come and help us to conquer the land first, then you can come back here. The reason you could say that is because this was within the boundaries of the land. But this wasn't the only thing God gave. He gave them all of this, and really all the way down here. So why are they only focusing here? And that's because civilizations grow where there's a water source. Well, there's a water source here, there's one here, but there's nothing here. This is all desert. And the problem is they never even set up outposts. In Numbers 33 and verse 52, God tells them that they were to drive the inhabitants of the land out from before them. They were to destroy the pictures, the molten images, and destroy the high places. Everything about their paganism they were to get rid of. Then he tells them in verse 55, if you fail to drive the inhabitants out, then those which ye let remain shall remain as pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and shall vex you in the land wherein ye dwell. So the problem is, Israel never even set up outposts, and people came in here and learned how to live a desert lifestyle and have physically arrested the land away from them, and now they're as pricks in their eyes and thorns in their sides, just as God said they would, and vexing them in the land. But it wasn't just this, it was this. Now, there's this little thing that's plaguing churches, and sadly it's coming into our fundamental independent Baptist churches. And it's this thing called replacement theology. Replacement theology declares that Israel the Jewish people, have so violated the Abrahamic covenant that God has now taken the promises that he made to Israel and given them to the church. Really? You know what that's saying? Do you mean to tell me that the church today, and I use that in its broadest sense, that the church today is living in 100% compliance with everything God declared in God's holy word? Of course not. Let me bring it closer to home. Do you mean to tell me that Fargo Baptist Church is living in 100% compliance? Let me bring it even closer to home. Do you mean to tell me every member of Fargo Baptist Church is living in 100% compliance? If they were, where are they tonight? See, Hebrews tells me, the Word of God tells me, forsake not. Now that's a command. This is not a suggestion. This is not a recommendation. This is not saying, you know what, folks, this would make me really happy if you would do this. This is God commanding his followers. Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is. And so much the more as you see the day approaching. Well, the day approaching would be the rapture. And I think everybody here would agree the rapture is soon to happen. So much the more are we not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. But in every church I go to all across this country, and I've been doing this now for this ministry for almost 30 years. And there are people I know because they brag about it. They go to bed on Saturday nights saying, well, we'll go Sunday morning, but not both Sunday school and the morning service. It's one or the other. And we're not going back Sunday night and forget Wednesday night. I have other things to do. Forsake not the assembling of ourselves together. That's a command. So see, when I say that we're not abiding by everything that God commands in his word, usually our minds run to the terrible, ugly, sinful, wicked things. But, you know, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. So to fail to be obedient to God's command to forsake not the assembling, that's a sin. And I'm telling you this to show you that the church stands in no better position for these promises than Israel does. Okay? We need to come off of that. But then what they don't understand is when they say that Israel violated the Abrahamic covenant. Do you know what Abraham was doing when God bestowed this covenant? Genesis chapter 15. You were wondering when I'd open the Bible, right? I've been quoting it, but misquoting it sometimes. But Genesis chapter 15. In the first 5 or 6 verses, Abraham is kvetching, that's belly aching to God. It's a Yiddish word. And that's griping and complaining, okay? How's this thing going to happen? I don't have a heir. I'm almost 100. My wife's almost 90. How's this thing supposed to work? The closest thing I have to an heir is my master servant. He's from Damascus. This can't be what you have in mind. God explains it all to him. He does catch on, because in verse 6, and speaking of Abram, and he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. So in verses 7 through 10, God instructs him to make a sacrifice. He's specific on the animals and the birds and how he wants it done. So Abram does exactly what, his name hasn't been changed, by the way, so it's Abram at this point. And he lays the carcasses out just so. And what I like in this passage is the rest of the day, Abram was nothing more than a scarecrow. Look at verse 12, or verse 11. See, that's why I like your pastor. He has my sense of humor. I say that everywhere I preach this, and they look at me. He got it. Okay, so verse 11. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. It's a scarecrow. That's all he was. So, what was Abram doing? when God entered into this covenant. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. A deep sleep. He didn't just doze off, like people do when I get up to preach. He didn't just doze off, the head cocks back, the mouth opens up, the tongue's hanging. You look like a Pez dispenser, It's not what happened. He was in a deep sleep. This is that REM stuff. He's dreaming in Technicolor. And in this moment, God gives him a vision of the Egyptian captivity and how God will deliver them from that. But then we come down further, and we come to verse 17. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. This is euphemistic language, folks, telling us that God and God alone walked amidst the pieces of the sacrifice. If this was a bilateral covenant, Abram also would have had to walk amidst the pieces of the sacrifices. But Abram was sound asleep. He had no clue what was going on. He was dead to the world. This is God and God alone in his sovereignty. And that's a really good word. We need to stop running scared of this word sovereignty. We let the Calvinists take that away from us and they look down their nose and say, well, you just don't believe in a sovereign God. I absolutely believe in a sovereign God. I tell them, you're the one that has a problem with a sovereign God. And they look, absolutely not. I said, okay, a sovereign God. My God is sovereign. That means my God can do what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, anytime he wants, and nobody can tell him he can't. Right. So my God being sovereign, in his sovereignty, chose to leave the decision to get saved up to me. They go, oh no, God can't do that. See? Which one of us has a sovereign God? You've just told me your God can't do something that you don't want him to do, so he's accountable to you, not you to him. You just got to know how to talk to these guys. Then they walk off turning the air blue. But anyhow, in his sovereignty, God just chose Abram. I always say, when people say that my people that were God's chosen people, I always want to point out, before God could choose my people, he had to create us, and he created us out of the barren womb of a 90-year-old woman and chose us. It was God in his sovereignty bestowing this covenant on Abram. It was unilateral. Abram was sound asleep. He did not enter into any agreement. Therefore, he could not violate this agreement. It was not a quid pro quo. God was not saying, if you'll do these things, and I'll be your God. If you fail in these things, I'm no longer your God. Abram was sound asleep. God alone walked amidst the pieces of the sacrifice. God bestowed this covenant in his sovereignty. He chose Abram and gave him this covenant. It's unilateral, it's eternal, it's unconditional. There's nothing Abram can do or his seed to violate it. So then they say, well, that might be all well and good, but that doesn't mean his seed has any rights to any of this. Let's see what the Bible says. Verse 18. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying unto who? Thy seed have I given this land. And then he gives defines the boundaries from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, and then all the land of all the ites. Okay? It's easier to discern it when you look at Joshua 1 and verse 9. 1 and verse 4. And it's these boundaries that I laid out for you already. This is what God gave to Abram's seed, and it still belongs to them to this very day. Replacement theology has no place in Scripture. It really, honestly, is rooted out of a heart of anti-Semitism to diminish Israel in the sight of the world so that we can get rid of them and do away with them. It has nothing to do with the Scriptures. I love it. Later in the Hebrew Scriptures, God chides my people and said, I didn't choose you because you were the biggest, the mightiest, the most spiritual. I chose you because you were nothing. And it was God's decision. Now, this must have been a problem even in Paul's day, because in Romans chapter 11, Paul's confronting it. Romans 11 and verse 1, why else is he saying, I say then, hath God cast away his people? And this is where you have to love the King James, because in the most forceful terms, the other versions will water it down, but here in the most forceful terms, God forbid, for I too am an Israelite. If God cast away his people, that means he cast me away with them. God forbid, for I too am an Israelite. So it's settled in Scripture, folks. These are God's people. He'll spank them. He'll bless them. But they're in his control. And he hasn't removed his promises from them. If God could take the promises as he's made to Abram and to his seed and give them to anyone, what hope do you have that any promise God's made you is secure? And that includes John 3:16. So, then, so we see that the land grant is secure, and that one day they'll actually inhabit this. Probably won't be till the millennial kingdom. But then how does this portend, all of this portend prophetically? The last 4 years of the previous administration. And you know, listen, when we gripe and complain, when we kvetch about this sort of thing, right? Remember, the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it as he will. So I'm fully convinced, as much as I hated every moment of those 4 years, we needed them to complete the world shift to where today reading prophecy is like reading the local newspaper, looking at the evening news on television. And we're seeing prophecy coming to life right in front of us. We can see that great battle in Ezekiel 38 and 39 coming into play like we could never see it before. And remember, okay, I think we're going to have a little respite with what our president now has accomplished, but remember what the Scriptures teach. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. So always keep that. Just because we may have some time of peace, it doesn't mean it's done and it won't happen. So what we're seeing is October 7th, Israel was viciously attacked. And in a fit of clarity, Joseph Biden responded, and he put strike forces here offshore. And by the way, this is just another view of that land grant. Offshore in the Mediterranean. He aimed their guns at Tehran, the capital of Iran. And he told them, first of all, he says, we're 100% behind Israel. He was so far behind Israel you couldn't even see him. But we're 100% behind Israel, and at the same time, he's shoveling $10 billion of our tax dollars to Iran. What did he suppose they were doing with that money? All total, he gave them $110 billion of our dollars. And they were financing all of this. And so, talking out of both sides of his mouth, but he did say, if you fire on Jerusalem, then we'll attack you. So China gets into it and says, if you attack Iran, we'll attack you because China gets her oil from Iran. And she needed to keep that supply coming. We have seen now, and I have to look it up, since Syria, I got a boss in my mind, and that's not a boss. The leader of Syria that got exiled just recently. Russia, I have to see since his exile if Russia's still there, but Russia came because he created the civil war with his own people in Syria, and for the first time in Russia's ancient history, Russia's had her military here in Syria. I have to see if they're still there. And the problem here is they share this border with Israel. And the Bible tells us in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that the day is coming where all nations of the world will rise up against Jerusalem. And folks, that's spelled A-L-L, and it does not read all nations except for. Because everybody chants back and says, well, not America. Really? Have you not seen what's going on in this country? And it emanates from the halls of our Congress these days. Yes, America. And so the thing that we've got to remember is America is mentioned nowhere in prophecy. We don't have to exist when all of this is happening. We don't have to exist when the rapture comes. I hope we do. But I wonder what fashion we will take at that point. Because there are those in the halls of power in this country that are seeking to so drastically transform America. Look, New York's about to elect a communist as their mayor. How could this possibly happen in the United States of America? But there it is. So we don't have to exist. We're not mentioned anywhere in prophecy. So somebody yelled out in one church, yeah, but America didn't exist when those prophecies were written. I said, seriously, that's what you want to go with? The God that knows the end from the beginning didn't know that America would exist? Couldn't speak of us euphemistically like this mighty power from the west? He talks about this great power from the north. He couldn't have done this? Come on, think a little longer before you spout off, because once you get it out there, you can't get it back. So anyhow, so we have that. Turkey desperately wants to get into this. Saudi Arabia, up until recently, was quaking in her boots. She was about to sign on to the Abraham Accords in Donald Trump's first tenure, but when Biden seemed to nullify those, she didn't want to sign on to those, and she actually signed an accord with Iran, and I think they've given up on that and are ready to sign on to the Abrahamic Accords again. But you had all of this now where the world is coalescing on Jerusalem, just like Ezekiel 38 and 39 tells us it will. And these things have to happen, and they couldn't have happened. Honestly, they couldn't have happened without 4 years of a Joseph Biden. I want to cut my tongue out for saying that, but still, it's true. And we've got to, see, we all want the rapture to come, but we don't want to have to live through what God says will happen before it comes. My Bible tells me that Paul told the church or he told Timothy, right? In the last days, perilous times shall come. It's not going to be an earth awakening revival. Perilous times. And so we see that it's all coming to a head. Now, folks, this is not why I believe that we're living in the generation that will hear the trumpet sound. Because that's a pretty negative reason, and that makes the rapture an escape. But go to Ezekiel 37, and Ezekiel 37, the last several verses, picking up at verse 24. And Ezekiel says, and David my servant, This is God declaring this. And again, that's euphemism for Messiah. And David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they all shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob my servant. That's Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Wherein your fathers have dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, and they and their children and their children's children forever. And my servant David, or Messiah, shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Yea, I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and the heathen shall know that I, the Lord, do sanctify Israel, and my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Speaking of that third temple, God is saying, when the world sees my temple, my sanctuary, and folks, you just don't know how close we are to that temple being a reality. Every year on my tour, I take you to the Temple Institute, and these are the ones that are tasked with making the preparations for the next temple. And they'll show you all that they're doing, and they'll show you the garments of the high priest. It's a crown of gold with the name of God emblazoned on it, the ephod, the breastplate with the 12 gemstones representing the 12 tribes. They'll show you the table of showbread, the altar of incense. They wanted the original temple menorah, the golden lampstand, returned. We know Titus took it to Rome. It's etched in stone in the Ark of Titus there in Rome. And the Pope was making a historic visit to Jerusalem back in the year 2000. He promised to bring a gift with him. Expectations were running rampant. I mean, who else would have it? Certainly he's going to bring it. Well, he didn't. They spent several $1 million in gold and made another one, and it's there. We'll show it to you. They'll tell you about how they're training it, raising up generations of Levitical priests, how they're raising up generations of high priests, and they're taking these from infancy. They have young couples committing their baby boys to their care, and they're raising them for the first 13 years of their lives. They're on the second floor of this building. Their feet won't touch the earth for those first 13 years. God cursed the ground for Adam's sake so that they shouldn't be corrupted. It's a Hannah Samuel kind of thing. You know, parents can come visit, but they can't take Junior home. And they have young families committing their baby boys to them for this care. To make sure they have the right lineage, they're doing DNA testing. And through DNA testing, they have discovered, unique to those of the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe, on the Y chromosome that distinguishes a male, there's a distinctive marker. Isn't God cool? Don't tell me God doesn't understand science. The scientists are a little verklempt with God. God fully understands science. I mean, what does all this tell us? Not the last time, but in 2019, we were there, and I saw something I'd never seen before. I asked the young lady guiding us through, I said, what is this? I've never seen this before. She said, it's a portable altar of sacrifice. When we get the word to rebuild, before we can ever get the ground cleared, we can take that up there and begin to sacrifice. She told us two quick things before we ever get the ground cleared. The Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque are going to be removed. Then we can take that up there and begin to sacrifice. The reason to rebuild the temple is all about reinstituting the temple sacrifices. And they are ready to go. They have the red heifer. It originally came out of Mississippi, quite a while back, around the turn of the century, really. That sounds so long ago, doesn't it? And now these 5 to 7 that came out of Texas last year. And so this way they can perpetuate the herd and have solid red heifers when they need them for this specific sacrifice. They are ready to go. I had 9 preachers on my tour in 2023. And on the way out of the Temple Institute, one of them asked the young man guiding us through, he said, all this is very exciting, When will you be ready to start building? He said, we are ready to build now. We can start tomorrow. All we need is the authority. Folks, this is the third temple that we're talking about, the tribulation day temple that will be purged and reconsecrated and become the millennial temple. This is what God's talking about in Ezekiel 37. When my sanctuary is standing in the midst of my people in Jerusalem. We are there, folks. They're just waiting on somebody with a chutzpah to tell them to go do it. It could start tomorrow. That's why I think that the rapture, look, if this is a tribulation day temple we're talking about, the next one we read about in the Word of God, how much closer to the rapture do we have to be? We are right on the precipice of hearing the sound of the trumpet. Are you ready for that? Are you really ready for that? Being ready for that trumpet to sound is not just that you're saved, although that's the first thing you need to make certain of, but that you're also living a life consecrated to Jesus Christ and to the Lord God Almighty in everything that you think, do, and say. That your life, as you live it on this earth, in this life, reflects everything that you claim to believe. And the problem that we have is that we have been so successful in dragging God down to our level that we think God is love, God is love. What did I say yesterday? Holy, holy, holy. 4 times in the Word of God. Twice in both Testaments. Nowhere does the Scriptures say love, love, love. Lord God Almighty. So what does God want us to know about Him? He's first and foremost holy, holy, holy. And just because we've convinced ourselves, just because we've let the devil delude us into believing that we can drag God down onto our level, and because God is love, He'll let me do whatever I want to do, and I'll still be all right. That is not the God of the Bible. And you need to get that corrected. And the problem with it, because so many, this is why I use the word believer and not Christian. Christian means Christ-like. Not a lot of Christ-likeness going on. That doesn't mean you're not saved. That makes you a believer. But that's entry level. Then you need to grow and conform to the image of Christ. And too many are not willing to do that. And 30 years, 40 years later, they're still entry level. They're still just believers. But the problem is, because we've insisted on camping there, secure in the fact that our soul is saved and we've escaped hell, those around us who watch our lives, and then we try to tell them about Jesus, and they look at you and say, you know, I can't really hear what you're saying because what you're doing is too loud. We need to start living what we claim to believe. We have precious little time. The trumpet really is about to sound. The night is spent. It's high time that we wake out of sleep. And we need to realize that the last thing we want to do is be ashamed at His appearing. To reach up in the rapture, to embrace our long-awaited Savior and see Him looking at us like He looked at Peter that awful morning. And we know that He knows that we lived our life, though with our mouth claiming Jesus, with our life denying Him in any measurable way. Folks, we need to start living a life that people would see Jesus in us. Do you know why? Where the label Christian came from? In Antioch, for the first time, they looked at those apostles and they said, they're just like Christ. Anybody accuse you of that? Come on, folks, this is what we need to be doing. We need to live it so that the words that we say will have an impact on those around us. Because the trumpet's about to sound. And part of being ready is not just being saved, but living consecrated to Him. So there is no shame in His appearing.